After my daughter-in-law's shocking act, the guest discovered a transformative secret that left Clara reeling. The summer sun began its slow descent over the expansive Texas ranch, the familiar sounds of crickets rising against the backdrop of a palpable tension. Clara stood in the kitchen, wiping her hands on her worn apron, the rich smell of cornbread mingling with faint hints of hay and sweat. A scent she had tirelessly cultivated over nearly 5 decades. It was an evening meant for celebration, yet captured within her was a storm of dread. Jess, her son Mark's new wife, was a creature of charm and polished manners, but Clara could sense the flicker of distaste behind her bright eyes. She'd seen that look too many times, heard the whispers about how their humble roots could use a little refinement. As guests made small talk, Clara's heart thudded heavy, each beat reminding her of the history clinging to every corner of this ranch. Decades of struggle and sacrifice shaped the land, bore the grit of her ancestors. And although Clara was proud, she couldn't shake the fear of being misunderstood, of her efforts dismissed as mere stubbornness. Her children were her lifeblood, and now, through Jess, her family tangled in a web of perceived class. Every polite smile from Jess served as a reminder of the stakes. To keep Mark close, and to protect both of her children against the subtle poison of pride. It happened so suddenly. The uproarious laughter turned to a hushed murmur as Jess stumbled across an old trunk while searching for a drink. The wood bore cracks like the lines of Clara's hands, seasoned by labor. As guests encircled the trunk, curiosity bubbled. Clara felt her pulse quicken, a mixture of nostalgia and dread. What secrets would it unveil? Would it tarnish their family legacy? Her heart sank as Jess pulled out a delicate necklace, glimmering against the fading light. "Just look at this. Such antiques. This is what you treasure?" Jess scoffed, her laugh brittle. "A shabby legacy indeed. It's like an anchor, weighing you down." That sharp retort pierced Clara's pride, sending a murmur through the crowd. Clara's hands tightened around the table's edge, her mind spiraling. This ranch was her lifeblood. Did Jess even understand the sacrifice each generation made to keep it alive? To Jess, the ranch was a weight. To Clara, it was everything. Before Clara could respond, another relative, eyes wide with intrigue, rummaged deeper into the trunk. Dust settled, and as pages unfolded, Clara's grandfather's unspoken stories swirled around the air. Tales of rising from nothing, of facing storms of hardship and loss. Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system, and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. Clara felt a maelstrom inside her, battling loyalty to her family and anger toward Jess for belittling years of toil. Voices rose around her. Each person shared a faded memory that resonated with Clara's heart. She was no longer just a steward. She was a guardian of legacies forged in fire. But what of Jess? This was Mark's new life. Yet the thought of severing a familial bond left Clara with even more fear. Could they be both heirlooms and anchors, forever trapped in the shadows of pride? As Jess's gaze bore into Clara, the room hushed, tension wrapping around the unspoken questions that lingered painfully in the air. Clara's voice quivered as she opened her mouth, contemplating whether to challenge Jess or retreat into silence. Right then, an undeniable decision loomed. A crossroads of honor and familial duty, and the room was a thunderous echo chamber of uncertainty. Clara felt the weight of that moment heavy on her chest, teetering on the brink of revealing everything she held dear. The next words could reshape everything, or destroy it all. Would they emerge from the ashes of misunderstanding? Or would this night seal the fate of their fragile relationships forever? Clara swallowed hard, forcing a breath into her lungs, feeling the tension winding tighter around her heart. The choice hung before her like low-hanging fruit, tantalizing yet dangerous. To say nothing would perpetuate the cycle of embarrassment. To speak could potentially rupture the delicate fabric of her family. An invisible clock ticked down as the room demanded an answer. She glanced around, the faces reflecting an expectation that felt almost unbearable. Her family looked to her, the matriarch burdened with both history and the promise of the future. Every line on her weathered face told a story. One of resilience, of love, but now also tainted with an inkling of doubt. Did Jess see her? Or was she just another relic, unworthy of appreciation? Jess? Clara finally began, her voice trembling like the last leaf on an autumn tree. What you see as an anchor, I see as a lifeline. The silence that followed was almost deafening. Clara felt her heart race, awareness surging through her limbs. It was no longer just about defending her past. It was about ensuring that her future, her children's futures, were rooted in understanding and respect. Each piece in that trunk bears history, stories that are ours. What we have here. She gestured around at the home, the land, and the family encircling her, is not just my legacy. It's yours now, too. You are a part of it, whether you want to be or not. With each word, Clara felt a shift. Like earth settling after a storm, it was grounded and firm. Jess's expression flickered. A blend of shock and something else, which Clara couldn't quite decipher. Was it recognition? Regret? Whatever it was, it opened a chink in the impenetrable armor Jess had worn since entering their lives. Clara seized the moment, heart pounding with determination. You say it weighs us down, but I see strength. Strength in who we are, where we came from. A ripple of murmurs swept through the crowd, eyes wide and mouths parted slightly, captivated by Clara's unexpected candor. The apprehension in the room morphed into curiosity. Clara's defiance poured itself into the flood of memories, stories of laughter shared on long evening walks, of sleepless nights spent brandishing a shovel, of unyielding hope amidst the harshness of uncertain seasons. Suddenly Clara could see it for herself, that Jess's disdain might unknowingly stem from her own insecurities. Needed a bridge, a connection to understand her husband's world more deeply. In that instant, Clara realized that she could extend a hand rather than a defense. I'd like you to know the stories that bind us. The things that made Mark who he is today. Some tension released. Clara felt lighter, yet her heart still wrestled with uncertainty. Would Jess be willing to step into a shared space, one that embraced this familial heritage? Or would she remain ensconced in her prejudices, an unwilling participant in a legacy she didn't cherish? Clara knew she couldn't control Jess's decision, but she could initiate a dialogue that stretched beyond misunderstanding. Mark stood nearby, his brow furrowed at the unfolding scene, and she caught a glimpse of concern mixed with hope in his eyes. Clara reached out, hoping this confrontation would ultimately lead to clarity and growth for everyone involved, not just for herself. As Jess took a step back, uncertainty clouding her features, Clara's mind whirred with potential next steps. If the link between them could be forged, it wouldn't be easy, but it could blossom into something meaningful. The air thickened once more as Clara carefully constructed her next words, realizing that the challenge had merely begun. Jess, she said, her voice stronger now. What do you truly value? Because perhaps we could start from there. Would that be the key to unlocking a shared future? Or would it deepen their divide? Time would reveal the answers, and abruptly, Clara felt the exhilarating tingle of hope amid her fear. As Jess hesitated, teetering on her response, Clara braced herself for the weight of that moment. Would their worlds collide or connect? Only time would tell. Clara watched Jess's eyes dart, recognition and uncertainty intertwining. The weight of her challenge hung palpably in the air, her breath waiting to be exhaled or suffocated. Jess appeared torn, a marionette wrestling against invisible strings. Clara could feel the resolve growing within her, but she had to navigate this delicate terrain with care. A single misstep could unravel everything. She took a step closer to Jess, lowering her voice to an intimate whisper. "Talk to me. I need to understand your perspective." As she spoke, Clara felt her instincts shifting from defense to collaboration, a pivot that surprised her. This wasn't about winning an argument. It was about unearthing the connective tissue binding them, transforming discomfort into dialogue. Jess's voice faltered, the first crack in her armor visible to Clara. "I thought if we cut ties with all this history, we could start fresh. Build our own legacy, not burdened by the past." She gestured dismissively towards the trunk and the memories Clara so deeply cherished. "I understand wanting to be free from it," Clara replied, her heart racing. "But history's a part of us. We can't ignore it." The hint of vulnerability in Jess's voice planted a seed of courage in Clara's heart, daring her to persist. "So let's rewrite it together. You, me, Mark. We could shape what this legacy looks like moving forward." Clara could see a flicker of interest in Jess's eyes. The idea of rewriting their narrative had power, perhaps a compelling antidote to resentment. Jess hesitated for a moment, her brow furrowed in contemplation. "You'd really want that?" Clara nodded earnestly. "Absolutely. But it needs your voice, too. This can't be a solo effort." The thought of finally sewing together their disparate histories lit a fire within her. As Clara spoke, the external world, the rustle of leaves in the garden outside, the murmurs of onlookers, faded into a distant hum. It was just the two of them, at this crossroads where Clara dared to reach out. She sensed a shift in Jess, the way she held herself, less rigid, less defensive. But then the weight of doubt crashed back over Clara. What if Jess rejected this opportunity to connect? A single beat passed, hesitation creeping in. "But what if my past still gets in the way?" Jess finally asked, her voice barely above a whisper. The vulnerability in her question hung heavily between them, laden with the memories they each carried. "Let's not let fear define us," Clara answered, her heart pounding with both trepidation and hope. "Our stories have shaped us, yes, but they don't have to confine us. We can build bridges instead of walls." The conviction in her voice startled even herself. Clara understood in that moment that she was advocating for not just their relationship, but for her own transformation as well. Jess's brow softened, if only slightly. "What if I don't know where to start? Then let's start together. We can explore the stories you define as burdens. Share why they trouble you." Clara saw the walls beginning to crack as Jess's defenses broke under the weight of her uncertainty. Mark stepped away from his half-hidden spot, catching Clara's eye with a silent plea for unity. A budding impatience that added urgency to their conversation. She stirred, emboldened by his support, and desperate for Jess to understand this was a shared journey. Jess took a deep breath, visibly weighing her values against the past they lived in. "I want the legacy to be loving, supportive, and free of judgment," she said more firmly, drawing Clara further into her world. "Yes," Clara beamed, sensing the potential blooming. "But love also thrives in understanding the complexity of those we claim to love. Can you allow me to help you explore what that legacy can look like together?" Jess blinked, her gaze fixed at Clara now with an openness that hadn't been there moments before. Clara sensed the tide turning, the winds of change beginning to stir as Jess navigated her emotional landscape. But just as hope seems to settle amongst uncertainty, A voice interrupted, slicing through the moment with the precision of an ice pick. "Can you even trust her?" The cutting remark seeped from the crowd around them, igniting a new wave of tension in Clara's chest. Clara turned to see no familiar face. In that instant, she understood. This wasn't about simply bridging their own worlds, but about preparing for the deeper, more complicated dynamics of the family diaspora and choices yet to be faced. She took a breath, ready for the confrontation looming on the horizon. Would Jess stand with her against the skepticism, or would it push her further away? In the crucible of momentous choices, Clara knew the stakes had risen even higher, propelling her forward into uncharted territory. The path to understanding still loomed uncertain, and Clara felt the thrill of anxiety mixed with anticipation gripping her heart. Clara felt a jolt of electricity course through her body as the question reverberated in the air, each syllable striking like a hammer on fragile glass. The uncertainty clawing at her insides was both familiar and foreign, engulfing her in a fog of vulnerability she hadn't anticipated. Trust had always been a delicate thread, woven with care and tinged with doubt. Who said that? Mark's voice rose above the mutterings, protective instinct igniting. His stance shifted as he positioned himself closer to Clara, fortifying her in that tumultuous moment. But Clara instinctively raised a hand, feeling the need to control the narrative that was threatening to spiral out of bounds. "It doesn't matter," she said, her voice steadier than she felt. "What matters is us." She turned back to Jess, whose expression was caught between apprehension and determination. Clara recognized that this was their moment, a crucible where they could either forge a connection or allow the shadows of doubt to layer once more between them. "Jess," Clara pressed gently, "we can't let outside voices dictate our journey. We are stronger than their insecurities." The insistence in her tone helped spark a glimmer of courage in Jess, whose brows knitted together in contemplation. I understand that," Jess replied slowly, almost as if she were speaking to the mirror of her own doubts. "But how can I be sure that this openness won't come back to haunt us? Everyone knows our past." Just then, Clara realized that this wasn't simply about her and Jess. It was also about the ghosts of their families bearing down on them, with the weight of judgment looming like a specter. Clara took a breath, feeling a shift within her. "Then let's confront that fear directly," she suggested. "Let's talk through what burdens us. If we can openly discuss it here, just us, then we can pick apart the judgment and just get to the truth about what we want for our legacy." Clara's confidence began to bloom within the challenge, transforming the tide of uncertainty that threatened to drown her. Backed by a moment of silence, Jess finally inhaled deeply, her shoulders relaxing just a fraction. "Okay," she said, her resolve crystallizing. "But you have to promise me that you won't judge, that you won't see me differently because of my truths." Clara felt a pulse of recognition. It was a request she had to take seriously, a reminder that vulnerability wasn't just about letting walls come down, but also about seeing the nuances that formed those walls in the first place. "I promise," she replied, her voice firm, as Jess began to share snippets of her history, battles with her own insecurities, familial expectations that felt suffocating. Clara listened intently. Each confession served not to diminish Jess, but to elevate their shared humanity. Clara realized that this was exactly how trust was built. It was in the peeling back of layers, uncovering mutual fears, and exposing the scars that prompted their behaviors. But deep down, a new concern arose. Could their shared understanding translate into a solid partnership? Would this fragile trust withstand external pressures? Clara's mind raced with possible scenarios of support, yet the shadows of doubt continued to taunt her. As Jess reached the end of a particularly painful anecdote, a flicker of alignment sparked between them. Clara felt the weight of their shared challenges, yet a question gnawed at her heart. "We can tackle this, Jess," But what if other people aren't as understanding as we strive to be? What if they reject our attempt to change? The tension shifted again as Jess regarded her thoughtfully. Then we find ways to set boundaries while still staying true to ourselves. Clara nodded slowly, mulling over Jess's words. The dawning realization of how much they could overcome together began to crystallize within her. But before she could voice her thoughts, another voice broke through their moment of clarity, sharper than before. And what makes you think you can control how others perceive your choices? The accusatory tone startled Clara, but she quelled the rising surge of frustration. We don't, but we can take control of our own narratives. Suddenly aware that the crowd had quieted, Clara felt the weight of the eyes upon them as she prepared for the inevitable scrutiny, ready to defend her resolve not just for herself, but for Jess. There was no going back. They were already in deeper than they had planned. Yet, just as Clara felt the surge of courage rise within her, the echoes of doubt clawed at her intuition. What if their efforts only magnified the scrutiny rather than silencing it? As Jess met Clara's gaze, an unspoken understanding passed between them, a determination to navigate the imminent storm together. Clara voiced what lingered in her mind. How do we prepare for what's to come? With that looming question, the stage was set for a confrontation that could redefine their relationship, not just with each other, but with their families. Clara realized she had crossed a threshold. The journey had transformed into a guided expedition into the heart of uncertainty, and the final act of their history was yet to be written. Clara's heart raced as she felt the invisible pressure of the crowd's gaze fixed upon her. Every breath was a battle against the mounting anxiety, but deep down, she knew that momentary panic couldn't unravel the path she'd chosen. Her thoughts churned, dissecting the duality of connection and vulnerability. How much of herself could she reveal without losing her composure? Mark's figure shifted closer, reminding Clara of the steady anchor he'd always been. Yet this encounter demanded more than just his support. This was about a partnership, a clear and mutual understanding built on shared truths and risks. Jess was still catching her breath from their intense dialogue. Clara knew it was time to act decisively. Let's be our own advocates. Clara began, forming her words with intention. Each one was a stepping stone toward solidifying their commitment to one another. We have an opportunity here to rewrite our narrative, together. If we can stand firm, speak our truth loudly and clearly, we can deter the judgment. It's about solidarity. Jess absorbed Clara's conviction, and in that moment, Clara recognized a glimmer of hope in her partner's eyes. But what if... Jess started, the fear creeping into her voice once more. Then we adapt, Clara interjected, surprised by the assertiveness in her own tone. We can't control others, but we can control our reactions. We can choose how we respond. Fear only limits us if we allow it to. As her words sank in, Clara could see the growth occurring in Jess. Where moments ago doubt had clouded her face, determination began to bloom. Okay, Jess finally conceded, the hesitance fading, replaced by something fresher. Let's commit to this, together. Clara took a deep breath, relishing the warmth of Jess's agreement. There was a power in unity that was palpable, and in that shared commitment, Clara felt her resolve strengthening. They could face the chaos ahead. They would be architects of their future rather than mere bystanders in the narrative others sought to impose. As the murmurs in the crowd began to stir again, Clara steeled herself, preparing for the inevitable confrontations. In that atmosphere of uncertainty, another voice emerged, albeit softer, but filled with a sharp wit. That's wonderful, ladies, but good luck convincing the ones who've made their minds up already. It was Kevin, the looming naysayer, whose skepticism had earned him a reputation among their circle. Clara turned to meet his gaze, her heart steady now, aligned with purpose. "And what will you do, Kevin?" she challenged, a defiant edge coloring her words. "Will you continue this cycle of negativity? Or can we explore the possibility of growth together?" Kevin's brow furrowed, uncertain how to respond. The realization that Clara's commitment had shifted the dynamics was unmistakable. The fear of rejection began to unravel, replaced by a sense of agency and hope. As other guests shifted and began to engage more with Clara and Jess, a spark ignited within Clara. She was discovering not just the strength in her voice, but a latent ability to influence the perceptions around her. It was not simply about defense, but about exploration, connection, and perhaps even forgiveness for the past. But Clara understood the road ahead would be convoluted. The external judgments could threaten the fragile foundation they were building. Self-doubt still lingered like a whisper, challenging her newfound courage. What if they faltered when opposition grew louder? Clara realized that they needed a strategy to protect their narrative as they built this newfound partnership. They couldn't afford to navigate this terrain unprepared. "Jess," Clara said, her voice edged with urgency. "We need to map out our response. What do we want to communicate when the challenges arise? It's about strategy now, not just sentiment." Jess nodded, a flicker of realization in her expression. The challenge of developing a proactive plan propelled Clara forward, igniting a fire to solidify their intent. With growing determination, Clara sensed the unfolding day was just as much about defense as it was about offense. The courage to set boundaries and advocate for their truths. She stood at the precipice of personal and relational development, ready to craft a narrative that declared their authenticity amid doubt. As they began to sketch their ideas for direct communication, Clara felt the uplifting surge of possibility sweep over her. A transformative journey awaited. But the looming question loomed ever larger. Would the strength of their resolve, together, be enough to withstand the scrutiny that threatened to surface? And were they truly prepared for the fight ahead? Clara's thoughts raced as she and Jess settled into a quiet corner, away from the prying eyes and murmurs that had swirled just moments before. The tension that had suffused their earlier interactions now transitioned into an adrenaline-fueled clarity. They were not just responding to doubt. They were taking the reins of their narrative. "Okay," Clara said, drawing in a steadier breath. "Strategy first. We've committed to being transparent, but transparency without a plan can breed vulnerability." She leaned in, feeling the weight of her own words. "Let's outline the key points we want to convey about our relationship, our choices, everything." Jess nodded slowly, still processing the shift in Clara's demeanor. "What if we frame it around growth? We've both changed since we started on this journey. It could resonate with people more positively." That suggestion sat well with Clara. It offered a distinct direction. "Right. Growth is relatable. No one wants to be stuck in a narrative of shame or misunderstanding. We need to present ourselves as evolving, as partners who support and uplift one another. Let's show them who we are, not just how we appear." As they jotted down ideas, Clara found herself reflecting on her own fears, the overwhelming concern about how others would view their partnership. She had spent years seeking acceptance, and it had often stunted her personal growth. But now, embracing vulnerability felt less like a risk and more like an opportunity. The realization flashed in her mind like a neon sign. Acceptance had to start with herself. "Let's take turns presenting our perspective," Clara proposed, the idea sparking confidence within her. "I'll go first, and I'll address the fears and misunderstandings head-on. That way, when you follow, you can build on it and share your experience." "Do you think we're ready?" Jess asked, hesitating. The question hinted at deeper vulnerabilities, uncertainties creeping back in. "Ready? Maybe not perfectly, but we're stronger together, and that's what matters. We can't afford to doubt ourselves anymore." Clara's own words surprised her, not just with their clarity but with the conviction behind them. Here she was, stepping into the arena, ready to advocate for both herself and the woman she loved. As the afternoon wore on, they practiced aloud, each iteration sharpening their points. Clara's pulse quickened with each constructive rehearsal. The fear that once paralyzed her transformed into a rush of empowerment. Jess's laughter broke through her nerves occasionally, making the strategy meetings feel less like battles and more like breakthroughs. Then Clara noticed Kevin on the outskirts of the gathering, a hawk in the shadows, watching their every move. A subconscious instinct to retreat stirred within her, but a determined resolve quickly quelled it. Responding to him with courage might be their greatest test yet. "Do you think he'll try to sway the others against us?" Jess mused, her voice thick with concern. Clara's brow furrowed. "He likely will, but I see that as an opportunity. If we can win over some people in that crowd, then we can begin to reshape how they perceive us. The more genuine we are, the harder it becomes for him to manipulate our narrative." A spark of innovation ignited in her, coupled with stark clarity about their purpose. Clara could feel the gears of strategy clicking into place. She was ready to confront the challenge head-on. Just as Clara began to sketch the last of their points, an unexpected voice broke into their energized space. "You two seem awfully confident for what you're planning," Kevin declared, stepping into their midst with an unmistakable challenge in his tone. Clara's breath caught, the air around her thickening. "Confidence is born from clarity, Kevin," she responded, surprising herself yet again with her boldness. She sensed this interaction was crucial. Her heart thudded as she prepared to stand her ground, ready to face the upcoming confrontation. Kevin threw her a scrutinizing look, and in that single moment, as their eyes locked, Clara understood the stakes were higher than just her relationship. It was about reclaiming her narrative and destiny. "Let's see just how clear you really are." He shot back, a smirk playing on his lips, and Clara's heartbeat quickened, knowing an unsuspected conflict was on the horizon. Would she have the power to steer both their truths and the perceptions of others in their favor when it truly mattered? The moment of impact loomed ever closer. Clara felt a surge of adrenaline as Kevin's words hung in the air, like a challenge thrown into an arena. The smirk on his face unnerved her, but it was the tension in the atmosphere that ignited a fire in her gut. That fire sparked clarity, illuminating the essence of the battle she faced. A battle not just for her relationship with Jess, but for her own self-acceptance and agency. "Maybe you'll find out," Clara said, her voice tinged with a newfound resolve. She exchanged a glance with Jess, both of them silently reassuring each other that they wouldn't back down now. Kevin tilted his head, skepticism etched across his features. "You think a few rehearsed lines will win anyone over? It's commendable that you're trying, but this isn't some theater performance. People can smell desperation." His words sliced through the confrontation, a calculated attempt to expose their vulnerabilities. Clara inhaled deeply, feeling the weight of his words but choosing not to falter. "We're not desperate, Kevin. We're genuine, and that's a strength you underestimate. We're ready to speak about who we truly are." "Speak?" Kevin mocked. "Or preach. People don't want to hear about your internal struggles, Clara. They want a story, something they can digest easily. It's much easier to cast you as the villain. That's the narrative they'd prefer." Each jibe struck harder than the last, setting Clara's mind racing. The mix of doubt and indignation fueled her determination. "Then let's rewrite that narrative," she declared, the fire within her intensifying. "Let's set a new course, one where we're in control." Kevin folded his arms, an amused look playing on his face. "Good luck with that. You think the crowd is going to forget the whispers, the rumors? Rumors can't hold ground against truth," Clara challenged, feeling the pulse of her heart steadying as she spoke. "What you see as shortcomings, we see as growth. It's what has brought us here today. We're not running from the past. We're owning it. In that moment, Clara understood the stakes had elevated beyond the personal. It was then that she grasped the challenge wasn't just to engage the audience outside, but to reinvigorate her own strength within. If she could own her narrative, perhaps that would inspire Jess to do the same. "Can you say the same?" she asked Kevin, her voice cutting through the tension. "Would you be willing to confront your own fears, or is it easier to hide behind dismissiveness?" For a fleeting second, Kevin's facade flickered with uncertainty, and Clara seized the opportunity. "We may not fit the mold you expect, but that makes our story unique. It's not about easy narratives, it's about authenticity." Jess stepped forward, bolstered by Clara's resolve. "Let's talk about how we've supported each other through our struggles, how love can be a catalyst for growth. It's a story worth hearing." Kevin's chuckle felt sharp, but Clara could see uncertainty edging into his demeanor. They were making progress. With every word Clara articulated, the impact of their relationship emerged as grounded, heartfelt, and powerful. "All right," he finally said with a narrowed gaze. "You want to spin your narrative? Prove you can convince them." With that, he stepped back, arms unfolded, leaving open the door to a confrontation yet to fully unfold. A dare, laced with the scent of vulnerability and challenge. Both Clara and Jess took a moment to regain their composure, emboldened by the encounter. Clara was aware that the true test lay ahead, not just in swaying the crowd, but in finding and keeping their resolve. She felt the energy in the air shift, crackling with potential. "Ready to present our truth?" Clara asked Jess, who nodded vigorously, a shared determination reflecting in her eyes. Together they turned to face the crowd, their stories waiting to emerge. Clara felt a rush of anticipation. Would they welcome the reality of her journey, or would it expose deeper rifts they hadn't yet confronted? As she stepped into the light, the stakes loomed larger than ever. Would the realities they shared transform perceptions, or merely deepen divides? Clara realized the next moments could change everything. "Let's show them who we truly are," she whispered to Jess, a sense of unity knitting them closer together. The anticipation pulsed like a heartbeat, and Clara knew they were on the precipice of a revelation, one that could either bind or break them. In the eyes of the unfolding crowd, Clara prepared herself, understanding that the real confrontation with truth and acceptance awaited them all. The moment of unveiling their authentic selves was finally here. But would it be liberating or devastating? The spotlight cast an illuminating glow on Clara, casting long shadows across the floor. Jess, standing closely beside her, seemed to pulse with shared determination, as if they were two sides of the same coin. Clara took a deep breath, feeling both fear and exhilaration tug at her heart. She sensed the eyes of the crowd, some indifferent, others curious, waiting for her to speak. "Today," she began, her voice steady yet powerful, "Jess and I want to share a story. Not just ours, but a reflection of growth, struggle, and authenticity." The words slipped out like music, resonating with her inner self. And for a moment, doubt retreated. Kevin's skeptical gaze lingered among the crowd, a residue of challenge in his expression. But Clara didn't let it deter her. With every sentence, she wove their experiences into a narrative tapestry, threading vulnerability with strength and pain with resilience. Love isn't just a moment of bliss. It's a journey filled with lessons in acceptance. Clara continued, her voice firm. "We've fought against preconceived notions, ventured through whispers that echo behind us. Yet, what we've found is that those whispers are the backdrop to our truth, not the core of it." A ripple of intrigue moved through the audience. Clara could feel a shift. The air thickened with anticipation as her own newfound power surged beneath her skin. With each heartfelt word, she painted not just the struggles of their relationship, but the growth each challenge had invited. Jess stepped forward, sharing openly about her own battles with self-worth and the moments that had threatened to overshadow their love. "We are here to challenge perceptions," she said, forthright, her voice imbued with a fervor that made Clara's heart swell. "We faced our fears, not to shy away from them but to stand tall against them." The authenticity in Jess's voice was palpable, compelling the audience to lean forward, as if drawn into their shared heartbeat. Clara noticed several faces shift from skeptical to contemplative, and that sparked a flame within her. As Clara matched Jess's fervor, she began to embrace her truth with greater clarity. "There was a time when I allowed doubts to dictate my worth," she revealed, connecting with the fears she once harbored. "I hid parts of myself, imprisoned by the thought that I needed to conform to an ideal. But love freed me." In the midst of their storytelling, Clara recognized her own evolution. Speaking openly like this, without decorum, without pretense. She was no longer the uncertain version of herself. She was a woman willing to stand on her own, bold in her journey with Jess. Each moment we chose to fight through our pain, we didn't just grow closer. We paved the way for deeper understanding. Clara took a breath, her eyes locking onto Kevin's, who still appeared unyielding but subtly shifted his body language, a sign of intrigue slipping through the cracks of his facade. As they spoke, Clara confronted the looming doubts. Were they powerful enough to sway the crowd? Were their truths resonating? But as she glanced at Jess, a silent promise exchanged between them solidified her resolve. The story they shared was not just for acceptance. It was an act of empowerment, both personal and profound. Their narrative crescendoed, reaching a place where fear was left behind, and all that remained was the strength of their connection. Clara ended with an invitation. "We ask you to reflect on your own journeys. What stories do you hide? What truths do you fear? It's only when we peel back the layers that we realize the power of our own narratives." As thunderous applause erupted from the audience, embarrassment mingled with pride. Clara stood, breathless, sharing a quick, triumphant glance with Jess. They had laid their souls bare and faced the uncertain inquiry of their truth. Yet amid the applause, Kevin's face bore a shadow of contemplation. Clara's heart raced. Suddenly she sensed that something was unraveling. The confrontation she'd invited. The very question that dared Kevin to reveal himself now hung heavy in the air. The moment felt pivotal, as if the ground had shifted beneath them. Clara peered out at Kevin, grappling with the fear of whatever awaited next. Would he recede back into the shadows of his doubts, or rise to confront his own truths? The tension thickened, and Clara knew this was just the beginning of their exploration. The next chapter was about to unfold, and the echoes of authenticity called forth something unexpected. Would Kevin take a step toward revealing his own vulnerabilities? Or would he remain hidden in the shadows of his discomfort? The applause began to die down, but Clara's heart thudded louder than ever. Eyes remained fixed on Kevin as their peers shifted, whispering amongst each other, scrambling to understand the weight of what Clara and Jess had just exposed. The air was charged with unspoken questions, and Clara knew Kevin could either rise to that challenge or retreat further into his defenses. "Now it's your turn, Kevin." Clara thought, the words a silent mantra. She could see his brow furrowing, the subtle twitch at his jaw signaling an internal battle. In that moment, it felt crucial, not just for her or Jess, but for him and everyone watching. This was more than a moment on stage. It was a chance for all of them to challenge their own pretenses, and few had done so more staunchly than Kevin. As if sensing her eyes upon him, Kevin shifted in his seat and raised his chin slightly, steeling himself. Clara's gaze remained locked on him. It was a silent dare. Could he claim some of the power Clara had just embraced? Would he step into the light, or cling to the shadows? "Sometimes," he finally spoke, his voice shaky but gaining strength as he continued. We forget how powerful vulnerability can be. The crowd stilled, curiosity stirring the air like wind around autumn leaves. Clara felt her chest tighten. He was starting to peel back layers, but she also sensed his hesitance. The same hesitance she had once felt. It can expose us, Kevin continued, glancing at Jess and then back to Clara. But it can also be freeing. I'm not sure I've been honest with myself or others about the kinds of expectations that have shaped my life. He paused, searching for the right words, forcing the tension to linger. You see this facade you think you know me by? It hasn't been real. It's been an illusion. Clara's heart raced at Kevin's admission. This was not the outcome she had anticipated. He had turned the confrontation into an exploration of self. Speaking those words must have required immense courage. Yet as she witnessed his struggle, embarrassment returned, overshadowing pride. She felt the weight of her choices, as if she had unearthed something powerful that now hung uncomfortably between them. She sensed Jess's hand on her shoulder, grounding her. Jess understood that their stories had nudged Kevin closer to the precipice, and now it was his leap to take. Clara had taken hers. Jess had taken hers. But Kevin... The stakes were higher for him. Societal whispers had clung to him longer. What if he crumbled? What if he simply backed down? The idea frightened Clara more than it should have. She questioned whether they had forged necessary strength in the process of their vulnerability as she searched his eyes for clues. It's daunting, Kevin admitted, shaking his head. To think that admitting doubt or fear could mean showing what really matters. Here, Clara wondered if he had the wisdom to see the duality in their shared experience, the beauty of growth coupled with the struggle. The audience waited. Even in the silence, Clara could feel the collective breath being held. Would Kevin courageously unearth his true self? Would he challenge his past while facing the present reality of their connection? After what felt like an eternity, he finally spoke again. I won't lie and say I'm ready, but that's part of the journey, right? And with that, he took a deep breath, a decision freeing him from the weight. Clara felt hope flickering in her chest, but it was too soon to celebrate. She could still see the reservations in his eyes. Could he transform this moment into an opportunity for growth, just as she and Jess had done? As Kevin hesitated, the room remained still. Clara's resolve hardened. This was merely the corner of a road, the beginning of a path neither of them fully understood. What lies beyond fear? She wondered. They had shifted paradigms. Now was the time to extend that shift beyond their own narratives. Would Kevin take this opportunity to confront his fears head-on? The atmosphere thickened again, filled with an anticipation that was almost tangible. Clara prepared herself for whatever might come next. She knew they were all teetering on the edge of something transformative. Whether it would be a gentle push towards enlightenment or a compelling fall into chaos, remained undecided. In that moment, she realized she was ready for either outcome. Transformations waited for no one. The question now was, how far would they go to discover their truest selves? Clara felt an electric thrill pulse through her as Kevin relinquished the weight of his facade, acknowledging vulnerability as the powerful thread binding them all. The room was poised. Every eye flicked between her and Jess, and Kevin, holding collective breaths that shimmered with anticipation. Whatever he uncovered in his moment of revelation could change everything. Fear can paralyze us, Kevin continued, his voice now steadier, his conviction sharpening. And I've been driven by it for too long. I've let it warp how I view others, and how I interact with this family. I should have been open to learning rather than passing judgment. Clara recognized that his admission echoed her own struggles, a reminder of how she too once waded through the murky waters of expectation and pride. The faces in the crowd morphed slowly from skepticism to intrigue, and Clara sensed a shift. Perceptions were beginning to change. A whisper of solidarity fluttered among the guests, growing louder with Kevin's admission. "So what if we turn that fear into something powerful?" he concluded. "What if we created a group where we can be honest, without fear of judgment?" Clara felt a wave of pride surge within her. His honesty acted like a mirror, reflecting her journey and showcasing the mutual transformation now blossoming in them all. It reminded her of the truth she'd recently embraced. Growth, acknowledgement, and shared vulnerability were not liabilities, but the fabric of understanding. Threads weaving them all together more intricately than they could have imagined. As Kevin's words settled, Clara turned to Jess, whose eyes gleamed with triumph. This was the opening they needed. A blossoming space for vulnerability to infuse their relationships. "Yes, that's it. We can create a safe haven for all of us," Clara declared, feeling the momentum swell anew. "Let's open the dialogue. Let's talk about our fears, our pasts, and what that means for us now." Those words lingered in the air like the sweet sound of a bell ringing. They were an invitation to community and unity. Clara noticed some guests exchanging nods and murmurs of agreement, as if the moment was alighting a flame within their hearts as well. The tide was shifting, and this time it felt like liberation rather than confrontation. Jess stepped forward, arms open to the assembly. "Everyone carries a history, a legacy, and we get to decide what it means for our future." Clara could feel how Jess's voice resonated, echoing the sentiments Clara had voiced moments before. It was as if they now solidified a pact, both for themselves and for the family evolving around them. But inside her swirled still a tempest of thoughts. Was this newfound understanding enough to bridge the perceived divides between their diverse backgrounds? Were they prepared for the trials ahead? Memories of earlier fears skittishly danced along the edges of Clara's mind, yet she banished them one by one. This was a pivotal shift, not just for the crowd, but also for her own evolution. "Let's agree to meet weekly, explore what it means to be a part of this mosaic," Clara proposed boldly, an idea sparking like fireworks within her. "We can share our stories, our fears about our expectations. No judgments, just exploration." The audience responded, murmurs bubbling into agreement. Clara couldn't help but feel the emergence of community forming before her. Mark's protective presence breached the background, and Clara met his gaze, her heart swelling with gratitude. He saw her resilience. The courage blossomed through their united efforts. "Together, we can reclaim our narratives," Mark added, his voice steady with pride. "History is complex, but through understanding, we can mold it to shape our shared forward." Clara's confidence surged. Nothing felt more invigorating than the promise of forging deeper relationships through honesty, and it stemmed from her journey. She felt transformed, stepping out of her previous constraints into a brighter ethos, supported by understanding rather than judgment. As the night deepened, voices mingled in palpable excitement. Clara turned to Jess, grasping her hand in acknowledgement. They may have stumbled into this moment under the weight of misunderstanding and prejudice, but they were cultivating something far more significant. Fresh beginnings blooming amidst the shared soil of connection. A sense of peace enveloped Clara amid the chatter and laughter. She stood taller, grounded in her newly established identity. One that was proud, secure in her place within both Jess's and her family's life. She had learned to harmonize her narratives while opening the space for others to tell theirs, letting compassion and authenticity erect the foundation of their collective legacy. "Let's never waver from this path," Jess whispered to Clara, and their eyes locked, a promise exchanged that echoed throughout the room, intertwining their intentions with the very essence of hope and solidarity. And in that single moment, Clara realized what she had truly achieved. She was no longer just a keeper of her family history, but a catalyst for universal healing within a diluted world. She had conquered the fear that had previously held her captive and emerged resolute, a cornerstone within her family tied by threads of compassion and understanding. Together we'll write a legacy that honors every voice. With that, Clara glanced at the crowd, infusing it with her newfound confidence. And for the first time, she finally knew that their story wouldn't just survive. It would flourish. Now was the moment to act and keep this momentum. Subscribe immediately to the channel to not miss the next exclusive emotional stories. Leave a like now to feed the algorithm. Comment your reactions and theories about the ending. Share instantly this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this conclusion. You need to subscribe now. This is the moment to show your support. Don't wait even one more second to share.